It's 3:30 and we're quorate, so can I have the attention of members so that we can start this meeting an extraordinary plenary, in brackets, Crossrail, close brackets. And it's a question and answer session on the Elizabeth line, and we have with us the Mayor, and I'll introduce the other guests in a moment, and just have to do just a little bit of formality. So can I ask if there are any apologies for absence?
We have apologies, Chair, from Assembly Member Bailey and Assembly Member Duval.
Right. And then can I ask the Assembly to note the recommendations set out at item 2? Noted. And can I also now ask, do members have any other declarations to make which are relevant to the item on the agenda for this meeting? No? Thank you. Okay. So, as I say, single item meeting, and we're looking, as stated, to finish around an hour's time. And I want us now to then move to the question and answer session. After I've introduced the guests that we have, the Mayor will give us an opening statement of no longer than 5 minutes. And then there will be one lead-off question. I'll start the first question as the Chair, and then Assembly members from the groups on the Assembly will then ask supplementary questions. So can I welcome the Mayor of London? Can I also welcome the Commissioner of TfL, Mike Brown, MVO, the Chairman of Crossrail Limited, Tony Meggs, and the Chief Exec of Crossrail Limited, Mark Wilde. So thank you for your presence here at this session. And then over to you, Mayor, for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chair, for accepting my offer to appear before the Assembly today. As you know, last Thursday, the new leadership of Crossrail agreed and announced a revised schedule for when the Elizabeth line will open to passengers. As many risks and uncertainties remain in the development and testing of the train and signalling systems, Crossrail's plan identifies a 6-month delivery window with a midpoint at the end of 2020. This would include all stations along the central section except for Bond Street, which would be delayed due to some particular design and construction challenges at that location. Crossrail has also advised that they expect to deliver the project within the funding envelope we agreed with the government in December last year. This is a result of months of work to review the programme and work out exactly what is required to see the construction and testing completed and the line opened. Not only have the new leadership team produced a robust and realistic plan to put the programme back on track, they've approached it with an openness and transparency that has been hugely helpful. I've consistently emphasised the need for regular and transparent reporting, and the new leadership has responded positively. As an example, it is a major step forward that the joint sponsors, TfL and DfT, are now invited to attend every meeting of the Crossrail board. We're all keen to see the Elizabeth line open as soon as possible, but I know that many people also want to understand where things have gone wrong, no one more so than me. I'm aware that the Transport Committee published its report into the delay last week. This builds on a number of other reports, including the independent KPMG review commissioned by the sponsors. The Public Accounts Committee has also been conducting its investigation into the delay, and the National Audit Office is due to publish its report shortly. This work has provided helpful contributions around how the governance of the project can be improved, and the new Chair of Crossrail Limited, Tony Meggs, and new Chief Executive, Mark Wilde, have also significantly improved the reporting processes on the project. Chair, let me end by saying this. When complete, the Elizabeth line will transform travel across London and the South East, with new state-of-the-art trains taking millions of people more quickly across London, supporting hundreds of thousands of new homes and jobs. The new Chair and Chief Executive of Crossrail Limited and their team have worked extremely hard to produce this new plan. It provides a robust and realistic way forward, and I'll be doing what I can to support them in delivering it and getting the Elizabeth line open. We look forward to answering the Assembly's questions.
Thank you, Mayor. My lead-off question relates to the Transport Committee's recommendations in its latest report, Derailed, Getting Crossrail Back on Track. Can you start off, Mr. Mayor, by telling us how these recommendations will be taken forward?
Chair, can I thank, through you, the Transport Committee for their report. It builds on some of the other work that's been undertaken so far, the independent KPMG review. I wrote to the NAO and arranged for the Commissioner and myself and others to meet with the NAO. They'll be publishing their report shortly, as indeed will the Public Accounts Committee. The three main areas of our focus from the Transport Committee's report are around governance, around the independent reviewers, and around corporate culture, all of which were issues raised in the report and the number of recommendations made by the committee. The new Chair and Chief Executive began in their respective roles not too long ago. The new Chair and his Deputy in January of this year, and they've made a clear statement about the importance of good governance and openness and transparency. The Chair and the Chief Exec come to every TfL board meeting and give comprehensive updates in public, which is very important in relation to governance and confidence from the public, but also the testing that needs to take place of the information they provide us. In relation to the independent reviewers, Jacobs, who are the project rep, have had their role significantly enhanced. There's now been the appointment of a senior and industry recognised leader. There's an experienced project manager and additional roles providing greater capacity to the job Jacobs have to do. And in addition, the sponsors, DFT and TfL, have appointed an independent sponsor board member who will challenge the quality of assurance and information provided by Crossrail Limited, and they also receive technical advice as a sponsor board as well. And the third part, Chair, that I referred to is the corporate culture. You'll be aware of our concerns in relation to some of the things told to us by this independent board. I'm really pleased with the attitude of the new Chair, his Deputy and the Chief Executive in relation to openness. There's been a publication of previous board minutes before the current regime took over, but also the new Chief Executive now writes to the Chair of the Transport Committee every month, really important, but also the weekly dashboards they provide a huge amount of information on performance, on the testing, on safety performance, and there is also on average, every fortnight, a meeting between the Deputy Mayor, my Chief of Staff and the Crossrail team. Additionally, at that meeting are invited members of the TfL board who are on the Crossrail board, and the Commissioner and myself meet regularly with the senior team as well. And so we have seen a sea change in attitude from Crossrail to providing us and the other sponsor, the DFT, with the information that we've asked for and we receive.
Thank you. Any of the guests want to add anything to what the Mayor's just said? No, thank you. So, okay, I want to call then Assembly Member Echelona for her question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's good to hear that you are already seeking to implement some of the recommendations from that Transport Committee report. And in the spirit of that, and seeing that some of that has already been taken, I'm hoping we'll get response in transparency. So around that, to Mark Wilde in your new role, obviously the press release last week stated a new opening date. What's the main reason for that, and what are the challenges for that new March 2021 date that's now been announced?
So, thank you, Florence. We've spent a lot of time over the past 3 or 4 months doing two things. Firstly, just to reassure everybody, we've really tried to do our very best, and we've demonstrated increased production. So we haven't sort of rested on our laurels for 2 or 3 months, and we've made good progress actually on the project in the past 3 or 4 months physically. But we've also spent our time resequencing the project. The reality of Crossrail, and I don't really want to talk about who was to blame for it. Other people will do that. But the reality is the project had become completely out of sequence. If you go back to 2010, the sequence was very clear. The station should have been completed in 2016. The train would take a whole year to test after that, and then you'd get into a period of trial operations. The fact the project had become so confused, I suppose you would call it, by the stations being beyond the actual train systems presented an enormous technical challenge. So what we've done over the past 3 or 4 months is resequence the whole project and get it back into the right sequence. And the right sequence is to get the stations into a position where they can accept the train, get the train systems, Bombardier and Siemens, to a certain level of maturity, and then spend a lot of time in trial running, where we run the train extensively and we shake out all of the, people would understand these complex software systems, we shake out all of the bugs, because when we open stage 3, it's very important, it's end to end, and it's very safe and very reliable. So that is why we still have uncertainty, because there's uncertainty about how long it will take us to finish the tunnel and the stations and get the software to a certain level of maturity. That's the task for the next 9 months. But the real reason for the uncertainty is once we get there, we go through a very extensive period of shaking down the system, running it to its full capability. And the truth is we don't really know what we will find in that process. What we do know is it'll always be safe and it'll always be reliable. And that's why we made a decision with the chair not to try and land this project on a pinhead of a date, and just be very honest and transparent that at the moment we have a window of uncertainty of about 6 months, and we expect to open this railway at the end of 2020, but of course we'll do our very best to get it onto the leading edge of that. So hopefully that's a good explanation about what we've done and why we still have uncertainty in the project.
About the project. And that's good. So you're saying that with all the project confusion, quote unquote, there should be a more detailed plan. So in the press release last week it said there will be a detailed plan including what went wrong in the past. The new team has produced a robust and realistic plan to put Europe's most ambitious and complex infrastructure project back on track. Bearing in mind that we've had Jacobs involved to do an independent review so that we don't go in down the line and have any more project confusion, were they involved in this new ambitious, realistic plan, and did they sign it off?
So just to pick up and echo what the Mayor said, again, in the spirit of looking forward, the project representative has a really very important role in assuring the sponsors that we have our own, that it's in the correct sequence. And certainly the project representative now is very influential. One of the first things I did as chief executive, which wasn't common before, was for the project representative to join every meeting that I have. Project representative joins every board meeting that we have. The capability of the project representative is higher, and they have presented a report on the plan. It's not a matter of signing it off, but to quote the project representative, they have said it's a balanced approach and appropriate for this current phase. The programme at the moment is 400 or 500 lines. It's well sequenced, well structured. We've reviewed it ourselves internally extensively. Tony will say we finally put a second line of defence into Crossrail, which wasn't really there before in assurance. But over the next month, that 400, 500 line programme will turn into a 12,000 line detailed programme. So we can't sit here and say we've got all of the answers. And we're working very, very hard, but we don't expect the window to change, but we will have much more granularity. So yes, the PREP is of much higher quality and is fully on board with this approach.
You know, I'm just short for time. I'm, again, mindful of any confidentiality, but would the Transport Committee be able to see or have sight of that plan?
That's for the sponsors. Question for the sponsors.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Which I can't answer because the PREP actually works for the sponsors. So
That's
I think
fine.
I would direct that to the sponsors.
I'll take. Thank you. That's all from me, Chair.
Okay, Assembly Member Bacon.
Very much, Chair. Mr Mayor, on the 7th of January of this year, the Chief Finance Officer of Transport for London, Simon Gillenback, appeared in front of the Budget and Performance Committee and took questions on Transport for London's business plan. And during that Q&A, he said he was pushed on when he expected Crossrail to open. And he said that upon the modelling of various scenarios of delays to the remaining stages, he expected it to open within 18 months of its original due date, so that would imply June of 2020. The press release that came out last week obviously has built on that, and we now have the window of October 2020 to March 2021, so 22 to 28 months later than the original plan. But in addition, in the press release, it talked about the frequency of the midsection and the number of trains that will be running on it, and that's been downgraded from 24 per hour in the peak time to 12 per hour in the peak time. So the question is, what will be the financial impact on TfL's business plan of both the delay, the extended delay, and the reduction in frequency?
Well, the business plan that was created for the most recent business plan had built into it the fares revenues being lost for about 3 years. And the breakdown was over the 3 years. If you remember, so some of the transfer of passengers would come from already TfL lines, and the real additional fares stream would be from stages 4 and 5, people not currently using TfL service. That was the real boon for us. And so what was built in, Gareth, was in 1920, revenues loss of £200 million, of 2021, £300 million, and 21-22, £100 million. That is still in the plan, and we'll review the plan towards the end of this year. I'll be surprised if that revenues lost will change too much. I've seen media reports about different figures. The Commissioner's next to me, unless I've got something wrong. My understanding is that's broadly speaking the calculations that were made. It was a small c conservative calculation made in relation to revenues lost.
Yeah. The credit agency Moody's have upgraded the potential loss from 600 million that you've just referred to, which is in the business plan, to around about £1 billion. Is that a figure that you recognise?
There's an explanation for that, which is to do with the net and gross. And because I had a conversation with the Commission, as you'll appreciate, when I saw the press release you talk about, obviously my ears pricked up as well. And I'll discuss this with the Commissioner. That can be explained quite easily, actually, in relation to net and gross. But with your permission, if I could.
Yeah, so the Mayor is absolutely right. So the difference is that the difference between the 600 million and the billion, so the 400 million delta that is referred to from the credit ratings reassessment, is based on no cognizance being given to the passengers that are not abstracted from the Central Line and Jubilee Line, or indeed the DLR, or indeed buses. So there's a full breakdown assessment we've done on the number of passengers that would have moved from those lines, which is a part of the revenue projections you would have had for Crossrail in the gross number. So just for example, some 225 million for London Underground, 48 million for the DLR. So I've got all the detailed figures around that. It also doesn't take any recognition in those figures from the proposal which you'll be aware of for stage 5A, so-called, which is the opening of us taking over the existing Great Western services into the top level, the high level Paddington station later on this year, which is still on track, still on schedule. We're working closely with Network Rail and the Department for Transport on that, so it doesn't take account of that either. So that explains the delta between the 600 million and the £1 billion.
Okay. So, to cut a long story short then, the £144 million surplus the business plan envisages for 2022-23, you're confident will still be delivered despite the delayed opening of Crossrail?
I can't give you the exact figure, but we intend to be in surplus in 22-23, yes.
Yeah, well, the figure that I've given you is in the business plan.
Yeah.
Okay. A related question is around staff that have been hired for the Crossrail project on the assumption that it was going to open in December of last year. And I understand from a broadcast interview that I think Mr. Wilde gave to LBC, I think it was yesterday, or certainly within the last few days, there are 500 drivers and 200 maintenance technicians. And the phrase that you used in that interview was that they are going to be practicing. What does that mean?
Can I just, Gareth, can I answer the 24 trains an hour and 12 trains an hour? That's actually a miscommunication, so if I could just clarify, the plan of Crossrail was always actually 15 trains an hour for stage 3 and then 24 trains an hour in stage 4 when the services from the east come. Our revised plan is 12 trains an hour in stage 3 and 24 in stage 4, and that's actually a very conscious technical analysis done. The 12 trains an hour, which is 5 minutes between every train, provides the optimum reliability growth interval. So there isn't actually a degradation. The 15 to 12 was done for technical reasons.
Okay, because the quote that I gave you was from your press release.
I will check that, and I said the miscommunication might be our fault, but we will check it. It should say that 24 trains an hour is the outcome of stage 4, which obviously is at least 6 months after stage 3.
Okay.
So, yeah, the staff being hired, clearly it's disappointing that the railway didn't open. We were ready to accept this railway. The drivers were recruited, the maintenance staff. By practice, maybe this is loose language from me, by practice, these people are highly skilled technicians. Probably the highest skilled people actually in the UK railways. And to keep their competence at the right level, we can't have them sitting doing nothing. So word practice is very loose for me, but it means they keep their competency and their training at the right level, which means they do have to practice their skills. So we do use them. The drivers are actually fully utilised. The drivers, MTR, have done a very, very good job. We obviously drive trains in the east and west. We use the drivers to actually test our trains. There's dynamic testing we're doing with the drivers. And MTR have actually loaned out drivers to London Overground. So the driver group is actually productive. The maintenance technicians do have to maintain their skills and competence, which means they do have to practice their skills. And what they're doing is they're maintaining the equipment that we've installed. They are helping the Tier 1 contractors. So there's not a utilisation problem. Clearly, we'd rather them to be maintaining the real railway, but by practice we mean keeping their skills within the correct boundaries. Every 6 months, these maintenance technicians must practice certain activities, just like any technical person. So that's what we mean by practice.
Okay, so these people are employed full-time for potentially another thick end of another 2 years, 22 months maybe, and they're practicing.
No, again, I think that's a bit unfair to say that. I've explained that practice means keeping their skills at the appropriate level, just like a nurse, a doctor, a signalling testing engineer would do it. It's very, very important that technical people practice their skill. And they're practicing their skill in the maintenance of the equipment that we've installed.
I do understand. I don't mean to interrupt you or appear rude. It's just that I'm on time and you're sort of repeating what you've already said to me. So how much is it costing to employ these people for this amount of time while they're practicing?
I could get you the actual number outside of this meeting, so we'll provide that in a written response. The reality that I was going to say is they're actually doing productive work. They are helping our contractors and they are adding value. So it's not as effective as it should be running the railway, but they are adding value. They're a very, very important group of people to keep their motivation and skills at the right level, and they're doing productive work.
Okay. In the interest of time, perhaps if you could write to me afterwards and potentially give me the budgetary cost and also what they're actually doing, that would be very useful indeed.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
And that letter will be copied through the plenary route. Assembly Member Russell.
Mr Mayor, I want to talk about step-free access, particularly at outer London Crossrail stations. By December, Crossrail services should be running into Paddington from the west and into Liverpool Street from the east. And here we are now in 2019, and we're still waiting to see the works completed to upgrade these outer London Crossrail stations with step-free access, which is frustrating because Crossrail works have taken place across a whole decade, and making stations step-free could have been done much earlier in the programme. It's a small part of the Crossrail programme, but it could be absolutely life-changing for disabled Londoners. So my question is, when are the outstanding step-free upgrades going to be delivered?
Well, this is one of the issues I raised when I met with the new leadership team at Network Rail, and the Commissioner meets with him regularly, so maybe I can pass over to Mike to give you an answer.
Yes, so this is an issue that you're quite right, hasn't gone as fast as it might have done. I should just reassure, though, the plenary session chair through you that the The new leadership of Network Rail, as the Mayor implies, is absolutely all over this. The contracts are fully in place and the work is underway. So I am confident that the programme is now rolling out. Actually, it's not just step-free access, although that is, of course, a hugely important imperative, but to be able to operate the Stage 5A services that I referred to in the earlier answer to Assembly Member Bacon, some of the platforms do need lengthening on the western section. There needs to be cameras fitted so that safe operation from the drivers with the train interface can be operated. All that work is underway, and actually I'm scheduled to go out and visit and check those stations myself at first hand to ensure that work is delivering the progress it needs to. So the work is underway. The Chief Executive Network Rail has assured me that will be delivered at the earliest opportunity coincident with the, as close to as possible with the opening of the 5A services.
So is that right for the stations in the east, that's spring 2019? Are you still looking
Yeah,
at...
the station, the eastern position is actually more positive in terms of the work that's been done there.
And in the west, it's when the line opens in 2020?
Well, so in the west, just to be clear, we are working to deliver this as closely as possible to us taking over the full operation of the train service at the end of this calendar year.
So
2019.
So you think that you'll have the step-free in West London as well by 2019?
Not in all stations, but the plan is to get it as soon as possible after we take over the train services. But Mark, is that your?
No, that's exactly right. The east is a positive situation, apart from Ilford. But in the west, it is highly dependent on Network Rail, who have the funding now and are about to finish their contracting of placing the contracts for the rebuild of the packages of work, package 1 and package 2. They anticipate to complete that during 2020. It is disappointing, and I would say it's not a minor issue, it's of vital importance to customers, vital. And it is disappointing. We are where we are. The good news is Network Rail do have the funding and they have got the contracting strategy, but the programme will push into 2020 for the small number of stations that are outstanding.
For the small number of those western
stations. But they're very important, Ealing and these stations.
Yeah. Are you able to investigate whether there's any way you can bring that step-free functionality forward, or have you pushed it as far as you can?
It's very. I mean, perhaps I can take that, Mark, if I may. It's very difficult to see how we can, because they did run into a contracting challenge and indeed a funding challenge at some point. They're now in their new control period, and as I say, I really do think that the new leadership of Network Rail has gripped this in a way that perhaps wasn't always obvious before.
Thank you. I'm going to stop you there. Thank you.
Assembly Member Curtin.
Good afternoon. I'd like to ask you, Mark, about something you said at the beginning about resequencing the stages of the project, and you're going to spend 9 more months from now on the stations. Does that mean that you're not doing any track testing of the trains at the moment and won't be doing any for the next 9 months?
No, thank you, David. One of our difficult constraints is we do have to continue the dynamic testing. So at the moment, we test for 4 days a week, full time, with the power energized, 100 mile an hour train service running in the tunnel, and we do that to get to the software maturity that is one of our critical paths, which only leaves 3 days for the tunnel fit out to be finished. The stations, though, work independently of the dynamic testing. The advantage of the platform screen door means the station people can continue working even when we're doing the dynamic testing. Okay. The real constraint is in the completion of the tunnel fit out, and that isn't complete, but we do need to get there. The 3 criteria for getting to Christmas or the early part of 2020 are getting the software to a consent to operate with Siemens and Bombardier, getting the tunnel completely finished, and getting the stations to a certain level of completion to allow the train to run. This is why we're very confident in our plan. We've thought very carefully about that sequence, but there's lots to do between now and the early part of 2020.
Okay. What problems do you still have in terms of integrating the 3 different signalling systems that you've got to work with?
It's a huge challenge. There's a joke, isn't it? You wouldn't start from here. We probably wouldn't start from here, but it is a world's most complex signalling system. The really good news is that Siemens and Bombardier are now both in a situation where their software is stable and mature. The task now is integration, and the transitions and the integration of these signalling systems actually works. You know, at our test track at Melton, we can demonstrate it working pretty effectively. The thing about railway signalling, just to reassure every customer, 200 million people will use this, it's tested to really very, very high safety and reliability standards. So we're very confident in the technology. You might say, why are you uncertain, Mark? Well, we're uncertain because every glitch and every bug needs to be taken out of this system. So we're very confident in Siemens and Bombardier. We're in a better place than we've ever been, but there's still a real task ahead of integration. We have an integration facility at Chippenham in the West Country where Siemens and Bombardier have built a simulation of this railway, and we are, every minute of the day we're spending on this, and we couldn't have better support from the leadership of Siemens and Bombardier, but it's one of the world's most difficult tasks ahead of us, but we've got the right team.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And let me call upon Assemblymember Pigeon and Assemblymember Pigeon. I'm happy for the time that the Brexit Alliance hasn't been used to be gifted to you.
Yes,
And
yes, thank you very much.
we will tell you when you come to
colleagues
that time.
giving me a couple of minutes extra. Mr Mayor, the independent reviewer Jacobs reported significant risk to the December opening as early as January 2018. Can you set out how these monthly reports were shared with TfL board members and particularly members of the Finance Committee?
I think the Commissioner dealt with this last week to some extent. So what we've done in relation to Jacobs is enhanced their role. The problem we had before was the reassurances given by the former leadership team of Crossrail, Chair and others, was they could address some of the concerns raised by Jacobs. What happened would be, up until July last year, we only had, I think, one from TfL, non-exec director at the Crossrail board meetings. In July, we got an additional two who had the expertise to assist the one Ned on the Crossrail Limited board. DFT got an additional person, so we now have more non-exec directors checking the information given by Jacobs. And it's because of the concerns raised in July that there was the independent work done, which reported back at the end of August, that led to the changes made. So the sponsor board also didn't receive the same information they receive now, nor was the technical expertise and advice given to the sponsorship board. That's changed. And also what's changed, which wasn't happening before, was the invitations of the sponsors to the various board meetings.
Okay,
and so
but these reports were every month, and so at that point they went every month, and I've looked through the TfL board and finance committee papers throughout all of last year, and there is no mention of these Jacobs monthly reports. I've also heard from a TfL board member that they were never briefed about these independent reports with all their warnings in them. Why do you think TfL board members were kept in the dark about these serious warnings about Crossrail's opening?
we'll have to ask Sir Terry.
Okay, but you're chair of TfL. Were you not aware of these Jacobs reports?
Oh, we knew about the concerns, and even when the former chair came to the Assembly in September, he differentiated concerns from facts. And he kept on reassuring myself, and I'm sure the Commissioner will confirm this, but he was sticking to the December opening for Central Section, notwithstanding concerns raised by Jacobs and others. They could be, and that's one of the reasons why, of course, he asked for the additional funding. First, he was going to eat into the contingency of £600 million, and then asked for the further extension of £300 million, reassured us that actually of the £300 million, only £211 million would be spent, and that would be used to address concerns from Jacobs and others. And the facts in relation to the opening of Central Section wasn't established by him until the end of August. And I'm just grateful that we got the independent work done between July and August that led to some clarity in relation to when Central Section would open.
Right, so
And
I'm asking about
I'd make this point as well
reports.
in relation to opening
Mr.
of
Mac,
Central
really
Section.
very short of time, just a couple more points. On the
Well, you asked a
24th of
question.
July, as TfL, as sponsor and owner of Crossrail Limited, made a significant announcement to the London Stock Exchange, yet none of the reports and warnings from Jacobs were made public at this stage. Yet this is arguably what's known as material information. It's information that anyone lending to TfL should have known about, as it could impact on their financial decisions. Are you not concerned that those wishing to lend to TfL were also kept in the dark at this point?
One of the reasons why I lost confidence in the former chair was that the adverse effect notice was only served in August. if the chair of Crossrail was concerned about the central section not opening in December, I'd have expected the adverse event notice to be served sooner. You'll be aware that when you are, I speak in the presence of the current chair of Crossrail, when you are the chair of an independent organisation and you go to the sponsors and ask for additional money and they are testing the information you're given and you're reassuring them in relation to the additional money required, but also you've not served the adverse event notice, you've got to take as a sponsor the word of those who you've tasked with doing this job. And the previous chair didn't serve the adverse event notice until August, end of August.
But the
and in fact,
sponsors
you'll
did
be
have
aware-
this information. That's what worries me. Could I ask you one final question?
But you also will have seen the former chair of Crossrail come in here and speaking to the plenary and explaining the difference between the concerns he had and the facts. And I think the point he made was the facts only became established towards the end of August.
Okay. And then finally, as of today, the Crossrail board minutes that are published that you talked about earlier only go up to the 10th of January this year. That's more than 3.5 months. We have no information of what's going on at the Crossrail board. Could you guarantee that they're published as soon as possible and routinely going forward?
Well, I suspect your question was directed at the chair of Crossrail, but I understand why you want to ask me the question.
Well, just because you'd mentioned transparency earlier, could we make sure that's 3.5 months?
Yes.
We've got no information.
I think that is unacceptable. So I'll make sure that they get published more promptly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Sahata.
Right. This is a question for Mark Wilde. You've said in your April report to the London Assembly that the remaining stations on West Line were at different stages of their development. Some were commissioned and some were waiting to be commissioned. But when the central section opens up, will all those stations be functioning apart from Bond Street?
Yes. Yeah, all of the stations on our current modelling will be functional, accepting customers. Bond Street's got particular challenges that if people are interested in, I could give an answer on that. But yes, all stations will open except Bond Street.
Sorry, just cross purposes. That's the central section stations. That's the 10 stations rather than the 40.
Yes. Yeah. I was particularly concerned about the stations in Ealing and Lingdon, right? Ealing Broadway, West Ealing, Hayes and Harlington and West Drayton.
Yeah, all even in the outer section, all the stations will be open, but of course work still might be going on in those stations, will be going on, and we'll have to have hoardings and walkways for people, but it's our intention to get every station open, of course, yeah, and keep it open. Of course, we might have to close them for construction work, right, but that's really Network Rail to answer when they get more detailed plans.
Okay. I have another supplementary, Chair. Shall I come into that, or you want to come later on?
No, ask your question.
Okay, fine. I'm just want to follow up on this. It's clear from all sides of the Crossrail project that there are experts who've been giving you opinion, and there are experts who give a different opinion. How are you testing one set of experts with the other set of experts, and how's the scrutiny going on?
Can I just comment here? I think that one of the changes that we've tried to make is that, well, first of all, we have a lot more expertise amongst in the company itself, especially with respect to, operating railways, systems integration, and so on. Secondly, we've built a full sort of three-line of defence assurance system. Thirdly, we are in the process of finalising an independent advisory board of experts. My concern right now is that we have, we've got to let the guys get on with the work, so we're trying to be supportive in this. But actually one is looking for different opinions. Because of the complexity of the systems we're working, because there's a lot of judgment involved, it's okay to have differences of opinion, and out of that you can form a well-balanced view of what's realistic and what's not. So if everybody's agreed with everything and everybody else all the time, that's when you really worry. So those differences of opinion are actually an important part of making sure that we have a robust and achievable programme.
And has the Crossrail board established a committee for audit and risk management?
Yeah, we've done several things. We've re-established the risk and audit committee. We've also, for the first time, actually, put together an investment committee. We are re-establishing our remunerations nominations committee. We have led the creation of an expert panel that will be providing advice both to the executives and independently to the board. We have refreshed, actually, you know, as of now, everybody on the board, with one exception, has been there, less than a year. We've got one longer serving, so it's quite a refreshed and quite an expert board. The level of challenge, I would say, is very high, and you know, the PREP comes along to sort of make sure that we're providing the right levels of challenge. So
the risk papers which are done by the risk committee, do the same risk papers go to the board? Or are they a bridged version going to the board?
The board is getting advice, you know, from the risk assurance committee provides guidance to the board on, you know, various aspects of the programme.
My concern is, of course, that you have risk assessment papers, right, which go to the risk assessment board committee, right? And those papers go to the board, right? And I want to make sure that are the papers going in their entirety to the board, or are they being somehow managed, right, what goes to the board? Is a real
well,
question.
I sit on all these committees, so
Well, the challenge, of course, then, is that the board, right, which has independent executive, non-executive director on it, aren't getting the full flavour of all the risks, right?
No,
is a concern.
I understand the concern, but I can assure you that the board has full transparency of what's going on in each committee, what risks are reported, and as I say, we have, you know, various pieces of advice coming from different areas. Secondly, individual board members are really quite engaged. It's not that they show up once a month and sit down for a few hours and sift through things. Our individual board members are spending several days a week, in some cases, going into detail, you know, about individual components of the programme. So we have a very, very open environment and a very inquisitive board, and nothing is being kept.
This question for you, Mark. When were you last challenged by the board?
I think the board's very expert now.
Give me one area that's what you were challenged on by the board.
I only hesitate because I think it's the most challenging but the most constructive board I've ever reported into. You would imagine, because of all the scrutiny on this programme and the personalities involved, they are very focused. The good example is this opening window. We've had a lot of debate, detailed debate about the certainty of why I think it's the end of 2020 plus or minus 3 months, and we've had to demonstrate, and genuinely, up to the board meeting last Thursday, we genuinely made our mind up at that board meeting through a very rigorous open approach, and I'm just very supportive of working with Tony, that in such an uncertain situation we're in, this difference of opinion is really very healthy. So I really encourage it. They're a great board and they're very challenging. It isn't exactly a comfortable experience, but we're getting the fruits of it. But
I would go on and say, and just add that the executive is also behaving in a kind of receptive and open way. They're open to suggestions. They're open to advice, and I think we have a very constructive dialogue.
Thank you, Tony. The reason I'm coming in is I have other colleagues who want to come in too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear that this project, forgive the pun, is back on track and we have clarity and transparency. But your press release did say all stations in the central section would open apart from Bond Street. And your press release referred to design and delivery challenges. And so, Mark, I'm just going to ask you, what are those challenges and how far behind do you think Bond Street will be?
So there's three fundamental challenges ahead, and there is the easy bit actually was getting the plan together, and the exciting but complicated bit is the delivery of it, which we're fully committed to. There's three specific areas of concern. The first one is the integration of the signalling and the train systems. It's never actually been done before in the UK, and it's quite novel in the world. So we don't know what you don't know yet. All we know is we've got the right approach and the right rigorous approach. So there is uncertainty there. The other area is specifically Bond Street. Bond Street, we had a decision in this opening plan, and the crucial decision is, do we wait for Bond Street, or do we reorder Bond Street so we get into trial running as soon as possible? So at the moment, we only test this huge railway, 44 kilometres of it, in the central section with 4 trains, that's all. And we do that for safety reasons and is promoting a really rigorous testing approach. We need to step up to 35 trains to run the timetable. So the decision we made was to resequence Bond Street, and the bottom 3 layers of all these stations actually support the train system. They are 8 stories deep, these stations in the ground. They're huge complexes, and the very bottom 3 floors support the tunnel and the train. So that's why we really had to take a different approach at Bond Street, which we're going to do. And the very third interesting area is testing and commissioning of all these very, very complex stations. I've said before that the Great London Underground is a great organisation. Deliver 1 or 2 of these a year, and now we've got to deliver 10 of them in 12 months. So we have a very, very interesting challenge ahead about how we sequence the thousands of activities to hook up all of the CCTV cameras, the air conditioning units, the fire alarms, the PA announcements, and those tasks, over 100,000 tasks, need to be sequenced carefully. So software integration, resolution at Bond Street, and then finally hooking up the stations of the tasks ahead. On Bond Street specifically, we're very pleased to be working with Costa and Skanska. They are very collaborative in terms of the work we have ahead. We're going to have to work very closely with them. There is a new chief executive of Costain, Alex Vaughan, who we've met already, Mike's met, I think, to get their commitment. And we need to work very closely. And Bond Street, it's quite uncertain, but it wouldn't be many months after the opening of stage 3. We just are not certain at the moment, but we will become certain. It's certainly not the fact that Bond Street will be gone for years, and we'll do it as soon as we can. But the top priority of Bond Street is to get the subterranean areas in a position they can support the train, rather than everybody waiting to get the train going because Bond Street isn't quite ready. And that's why an intervention is needed at Bond Street. The reasons for the Bond Street delay are quite interesting actually, and they're mostly that the tunnelling was a year late at Bond Street. So Bond Street's a year behind every other station because of the tunnelling back in 2014. And we need to work with Costa and Skanska to reorder the work.
Thank you. In fact, Bond Street was the one I visited last summer.
Yeah.
And I was assured that it was still going to open. But even to a layperson, I could see that it didn't seem as far along as the other stations at all. So, but I'm glad to see it's a matter of months, hopefully.
After the opening of 3,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Prince.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Hi. Just for clarity, can you confirm you have read the committee's report, Derailed?
Yeah, I've got it here.
Brilliant, thank you.
And I can't read back to you every word for word, but I did read it when it came out. And
I'm sure. Thank you.
The fruity press release as well.
Very good. So we also accept, Mr. Mayor, that the committee is made up 10 London Assembly members, 4 Labour, 3 Conservative, 1 each from the Greens and Lib Dem's Brexit Alliance group. And so therefore it was very much a cross-party report, and that the report was unanimous. There were no dissensions on the report at all, which is, you know, sometimes that happens with more controversial reports. Happy with that?
Sorry?
Are you happy that it's a unanimous report?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So the report, which you may recall, includes a series of email exchanges regarding the TfL Commissioner's weekly update to you on the 22nd of February, 5th of March, 8th of May, 15th of May, 19th of June, 6th of August. Have you read those email exchanges in the report, Mr Mayor?
I've got it to hand. What's page number?
I believe it is, doesn't say here, but it's the pink ones, look like that, Mr Mayor.
Page 31, 32.
Spot on. Thank you. Are you, therefore, having read those, and you have them in front of you now, are you entirely comfortable with the Commissioner's decisions on what information he chose to keep from you, Mr Mayor?
Oh, no, I suspect there are thousands, if not millions, of drafts that go between staff before they reach me, where people try and clarify things, correct errors, make sure the information I'm provided is accurate, whether it's policing, whether it's the fire service, whether it's transport, whether it's Crossrail. I don't get to see the duck's legs. I get to see the ducks moving swiftly across the lake.
Good. Well, I'm trying to picture that one. So you're happy that there was important information there that the Commissioner redacted from those reports?
I'm confident in the information the Commissioner gave me, but also the Commissioner and I tested the information we provided by the former chair of Crossrail. The amount of meetings we were jointly at, where we were asking the chair questions and were being reassured by him. In fact, you were at a meeting in the House of Commons, you reminded us, in late July,
indeed,
where you were assured yourself from the former chair about the opening of Central Section in December. And you yourself were shocked.
That was an earlier meeting.
At that stage, you claimed to be shocked at what the chair was now saying.
Are you referring to the meeting you had on the 26th of July?
I'm referring to the meeting you told us about in the House of Commons.
No, I know that one. I'm asking you about the meeting you're referring to that you were at, where you had these alleged assurances. Oh, there are many meetings where we ask questions of the chair. I'll give you one example, which Assemblyman McCartney has reminded me of, around Bond Street. On a number of occasions, the Commissioner and I were concerned around Bond Street, and the former chair told us Bond Street would open up, maybe one or two of the entrances and exits wouldn't be open, but the station would be open when the Central Section opened in December. Lo and behold, we're now told that Central Section won't be open for another 2 years, but actually Bond Street will be months after Central Section. So that's just one example of the sort of testing we were doing of the former chair and the reassurances he was giving us. I'm going to move on from that. I might come back to that. So you are comfortable that in June, for example, the Commissioner removed a paragraph that stated there was insufficient time to complete the testing required ahead of the joint trial running and trial operations from the 1st of October 2018. Do you think that was helpful to you? Sorry, what? That the... Well, that he removed a paragraph or a section that told you quite clearly that there would be insufficient time to complete the testing required ahead of the joint trial running. Well, actually, on testing, again, one of the issues that we raised with the former chair was the issue of testing time. You've heard the new chief executive expressing his views on testing. We raised the issue of testing as well because, as the new chief executive has explained, there was a sequential process that's supposed to take place. And some of the questions we were asking the former chair was, do you have sufficient time to test? You see, and he was reassuring us that he did. This is very interesting, Mr Mayor, that you keep referring to what the former chair has told you. But actually, I think you'll find that the former chair had very few discussions with you, and that it was other members of the senior staff of Crossrail that was directly speaking with you, and that the former chair's position is that it wasn't his position to inform you on these operational matters. So it's very interesting that we're hearing all these things you're saying that the former chair informed you, whereas I think you'll find if you were to ask the former chair, he might actually deny that he informed you of many of these things, but he certainly is aware and does confirm that he was present at that meeting on June the 26th, which you referred to a bit earlier, where you were clearly told, well, not by him, but by another senior member, that it was very unlikely that Crossrail would actually be delivered in December, and that you actually asked, can we throw money at it? which is, I wonder why you would ask if you could throw money at a project if you thought it was going to happen on time. And yet this was around July the 26th.
Well, I think you're selectively quoting what the former chair has said. And the former chair, when he came to the Transport Committee himself on the 12th of September, made the point, and you were present at that meeting, and I quote, "We have always had to separate facts from concerns. The fact is that we did not have a formal position to take until the 29th of August. We did brief informally about concerns that we had at the board meetings and indeed in briefings with you, but you did not have any information of that sort that we provided on the 3rd of August any day earlier than that date." So it's easy for you to selectively choose for political reasons what the former chair said, but he has said quite clearly on the 12th of September to this plenary session, same members, his views on that.
Was that the words that were shoved in front of him just before the meeting? Were you referring to that document?
Well, I find it astonishing, Chair, that Assemblymember Prince is asserting that an experienced public servant of more than 30 years standing can be told what to do by either the Commissioner or myself. He may be able to be told what to do by his leader, but I can tell him this, I wouldn't appoint a chair, either the current chair or the former chair, or have confidence in him if he would do as I told him to do. And that's not the sort of people I surround myself with. I'm sorry if he surrounded himself with those sorts of people himself.
It's quite clear from the performance across your mayoralty that people don't do what you tell them to do, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Chair,
but what,
Chair,
I would like to move
Chair,
on
the
to
Assemblymember was present at the House of Commons when again the
Mr.
former
Mayor,
chair made quite clear to the House of Commons said section will open in December 2018.
No, Mr. Mayor, you're not going to talk across each other because we need clear questions and clear answers. It's over to you, Assemblymember Prince. Can I hear a question?
That's very kind of you, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. So it appears from all this interchange that we've been having, which has been fun, I'm sure, that you are quite comfortable that you were kept in the dark over many of the threats. And you're claiming that in spite of having attended meetings where issues were raised about the possibility of the line not being delivered on time, that you actually knew nothing about it, and you were absolutely shocked on the 28th of August because you've been kept in the dark. Do you like being compared to being a mushroom, Mr. Mayor? Because that's where that is where
Assemblymember Prince, can I stop you there?
You can.
And say it's not appropriate for you to be referring to the Mayor.
No, I didn't.
No, let me finish.
Well, are you stopping the time?
Yes, I am. I'm just saying, I think we can get on with question and answering without going into name calling. I would prefer that. So can I have your question to the Mayor? And if you are putting an assertion to him, then please finish the question with the appropriate question mark.
I will, because I obviously hadn't finished my question, but I take on board what you say, and
thank you.
And actually, I will withdraw that comment. That was probably a little unfair. So, let's be.
We're adults here.
Yeah, indeed. So, can I ask you, Mr. Mayor? I don't understand why you feel. What's the word I would like to use? Why you feel comfortable that you were kept in the dark over this entire time by redactions that your commissioner made, and that you're very pleased with your commissioner's performance because he kept you in the dark?
Well, Chair, I'm not happy that I was kept in the dark by the former chair of Crossrail, which is why I lost confidence in him and he was asked to resign. Now, he suddenly found new cheerleaders in the Assembly. That's for him and the Assembly. But the Assembly has members on it who were also kept in the dark by the former chair, from those who visited stations to those who went to House of Commons meeting and were briefed by him. But the former chair and the chief executive couldn't have been clearer when they came to the plenary in September and said they had concerns, and they expressed those to us, and we asked questions of the chair, and he reassured us that the central section was still open in December. And both the former chair and the former chief executive have said to the Assembly in September that they didn't know until... Well, you say you get that, but then you ask nonsense questions.
I just want to ask you another question then. Hopefully you won't consider this to be a nonsense question.
Well, it depends what it is. What's been written
Mr.
for you?
Mayor, from this point onwards, you know, we've got what's happened. That's behind us, I think. Will you give a commitment to the people of London now, Mr. Mayor, that you will take ownership of delivery of this project within the time spans that have now been given you to your new refresh board?
Oh, Chair, I'm not sure if the Chief Executive of Crossrail or the Chair could have been clearer. They, last week, at a Crossrail board
Question,
meeting...
Mr. Mayor, is will you take ownership of this project now?
Well, Chair, I couldn't have been clearer. That the Chair of Crossrail and the Chief Executive last week had a meeting at Crossrail board where they provided information in relation to when they thought the central section would open up and gave a 6-month window. I wrote to the former
Mr.
Chair...
Mayor, yes or no, will you give Londoners the assurance that yes or no that you will take ownership of this project from now on? Yes or no?
I think that's a straightforward question, Mr. Mayor.
It's called a closed question.
And he's wanting a yes or no answer. Please, work with us here. Yes
Chair,
or no?
Well, I'm trying to help you in this.
No. Yes or no, Mr. Mayor. It's a very simple question.
What I did to the former Chair was write and say I expected Crossrail to provide information by the end of April, and as soon as I had the information, I'd come to...
I'm going to stop you there because the Conservatives are out of time. And
yes or no?
Well, no, the member set forward the framework and wanted a yes or no. It was clear the Mayor wasn't going to give a yes or no. So and you're out of time.
So that's great. Well, that will be reported back to the people of London. He doesn't accept responsibility again.
Okay. I want now to go straight to Assembly Member Berry.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Mayor, there are lessons here in terms of being Mayor, managing the city, especially in relation to recommendation 8 from the committee. So can I ask, did the previous Mayor pass on any advice or concerns about the governance of this project or the need to stay on top of the details? And will you be passing on any advice to future mayors on these matters?
I can't recall the previous Mayor giving me advice in relation to Crossrail. And certainly I don't remember him ever using the words either publicly or privately, stay on top of the details. He's known for many things, but details is not one of them. In relation to lessons that we've learned, I think that the way Crossrail was set up as an autonomous body gave us very little locus in relation to getting involved in the day-to-day running. And actually, it's to credit to the new regime that they've been extremely open and transparent, allowing us to get involved in decisions that actually we technically shouldn't be getting involved in.
That's more or less voluntary, isn't it?
It is. And that's something to do with the setup. And I think one of the lessons we can learn, and one of the important things about the Transport Committee's report, which builds on the KPMG stuff, and we hope the NAO and Public Accounts Committee stuff, is how future infrastructure projects are set up in relation to constitution and checks and balances, because it is important there's accountability. We want the experts to do a good job and give them autonomy, but they've got to be held to account.
Okay, thank you. We'll move now to a question from Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you, Chair, and this question is to Mark Wilde. The previous executive team seems to have been so committed to the December 2018 deadline that they thought the unachievable was achievable, despite the existence of clear red flags, particularly in the Jacobs report, which we were hearing about earlier. What have you done to ensure that you and your executive team don't fall into the same trap?
So first thing, thanks, Tom. So the very first thing is we have a credible plan going forward. We've really gripped this project. I think we can demonstrate that grip actually in terms of improving production rates and the achievement of milestones. But more importantly, we have a plan going forward that is in a kind of a conventional sequence that people who are railway experts and operators would kind of understand, which is lengthy times in trial running and building up reliability rather than this extreme compression. So the first point is people should be very comforted by the plan itself. Secondly, and I really do think myself and the Chair have really thought about this carefully, about how we have a window of uncertainty and we create that window of uncertainty but still drive very hard on the forward edge of it. And one of the big breakthroughs I think we have is, first of all, we now have an expert team working for me and in the organisation in system integration and railway integration. And we also have the supply chain much tighter and closer to the programme. So There's more work to do to make sure the supply chain is fully integrated to this. But previously, the executive of Crossrail couldn't draw a line of sight between what was called the MOSH, the plan, and what the contractors said. Now, generally, our dates are slightly beyond what the contractors would say, which should give you a lot of comfort, that we should be able to pull the supply chain and Crossrail much tighter.
Previously, they would say a contractor said we'll finish at this date, that's the date, rather than saying we need to build in some contingency.
It's a matter of record that previously Crossrail would have very, very advanced dates, early dates. It will be done in April. The supply chain would be saying, no, it'll be done in September. And this was a real challenge. I'm sure it'll be in the lessons learned. There was quite a wide difference between what the supply chain said and what Crossrail Limited said. This is always a balance because you do want to have tension and pressure in the system, but you don't want such a wide gap that it becomes fantastical. Now, the difference is really quite small, and generally our dates are beyond the supply chain. In other words, we could drive hard. So we've got a logically sequenced plan. We do have an expert team now working in Crossrail with the appropriate assurance around it. But I think fundamentally the supply chain, Siemens, Bombardier, Costain, Balfour Beatty, Lang O'Rourke, are actually bound into the plan logically. And that's a great foundation to stand on. The challenge, of course, is it's hard and will be hard to deliver. There's a huge challenge ahead of us, but there should be a lot of confidence in it, actually.
I mean, if I may, just add, I mean, the level of sort of independent review of this new programme is far greater than anything that we saw in the past. I mean, it's one of the things that we've really, really focused on.
But isn't the issue slightly not the level of the independent review, but the extent to which the independent review was being taken on board by the management team? Because it seems like the risks were there, they were flagged, but they were not absorbed or acted upon.
Yeah, well, we are making sure, as a board, that that all of the independent advice is taken into account, taken into consideration. I should say, by the way, that there is still risk around this programme. That is why there is uncertainty, and secondly, that is why we plan to keep yourselves and other stakeholders fully informed on a regular basis of how the programme is progressing, whether or not we're meeting the milestones that we're laying out, and whether actually or not we are encountering any major issues. So we're taking quite a different approach here in terms of openness and transparency.
I'm pleased to hear that, because I think many of us here feel that we were not told the whole story, certainly, especially when the previous chair told us they'd booked the Queen. Just finally, very quickly, on the reports from Jacobs, I think, Mark, you'd said they were going to Crossrail. Are they going to TfL and to the Mayor's office as well?
Mike obviously could speak about what goes to the Mayor's office rather than me, but the sponsors do receive the project representative report. They're joint sponsors at a very senior level: Simon Killenbach, David Hughes, Polly and Matt and Ruth. So I would anticipate they're well socialised within the organisation.
Thank you. I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to leave it there. Sorry, Mike.
The sponsor board has been enhanced as well, Chair, it's worth saying. So there is Alison Munro, who chairs IIPAG. TfL is now on the sponsor board with the technical advisor as well. So the sponsor board itself has some independent oversight as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Assembly Member Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are about transparency of communications to the Mayor. Mr. Wild, we have been concerned about the differences in issues raised and words used between original drafts from Crossrail and the final weekly updates sent to the Mayor. The Mayor has already alluded today about regular and transparent reporting. The question is, are you confident that your views and accurate and pertinent updates are now getting to the Mayor?
Well, after this meeting, I'll brief the Deputy Mayor. We have a 2-weekly meeting. The Mayor sees Tony and myself every 6 weeks. I think that's the plan. I review what we put to TfL and what goes forward, and I can only say what I know looking forward, and my commitment is to be totally transparent, and I've never had any experience of my message not getting through to the people. I can't speak for the past, but looking forward, we're committed to full transparency. We've got nothing to hide. In fact, we've got everything to gain by people helping us and giving us advice. And I just speak as I find. I mean, all of our data gets through, and nobody's kind of interfering with us, and it's a bit, that's how we are.
Just to add, I mean, I with Mark met with the Mayor, and we've established a six weekly basis. And of course, if anything came up, that was sort of urgent and important in the intervening periods, I would not hesitate at all to meet directly with the Mayor. Look, we have a very open relationship.
That's good to hear. Mr. Mayor has also mentioned robust and realistic and improved reporting process. Can both Mr. Wilde and Mr. Brown confirm that your briefing and reports are still put together in the way they were done before, or is there a change in the way the reports are prepared and put to the Mayor?
Well, the report that now goes to the Mayor, if I can pick that up first, Mark, the report that now goes to the Mayor is a piece of management data that the Crossrail team uses to track progress in quite a technical way, actually, in terms of programme plans and achievement against those interim milestones and how it's all going. So it's a piece of information that is used, existing information that is used, is my understanding, by Mark and the executive team. So it's absolutely there in an open and transparent way, as reporting to the Mayor has always been. It's always been absolutely certain that the Mayor gets every information that we have access to, and that will continue. But this is a different format now under the new leadership of the team.
Something we've heard at Transport Committee meetings is that the process was that there will be emails sort of to and fro between Crossrail and TfL before they went to you, Mike, and then you would report it to the Mayor in a different manner. Has that changed?
Well,
to make sure it's accurate and transparent.
The difference in the past was, as you've heard, with all the meetings that the former chair went to, so 5 board meetings, 3 programme investment committees, 2 finance committees, 3 regular TfL Mayor meetings, all up to the end of July last year. Every one of those meetings, the chair and the Crossrail leadership team was saying this thing was on track to open in December. No if, no buts. There was certainly risks identified. I don't want to wipe that from the slate, but there was definitely a categoric assurance that the date of 9th of December was being held. The difference now is I talk to the new chair every single week. I talk to Mark usually multiple times of the week. I talk to the Mayor at least every 2 weeks for a formal meeting, but I see the Mayor on a much regular basis, nearly always, and there is full, absolute access to the full information that the Crossrail team is producing, both for me and for the Mayor. It's the same report.
Mr. Brown, I have a query here. Weekly briefing notes provided to the Mayor outlining progress ahead of the launch of the Elizabeth lines that have been placed on the TfL website and on 19th of December 18. Have the briefs been stopped? Why are these briefs not any longer made public?
Can I have the briefest of answers, please?
Well, I'll find out the answer to that question. These are open, transparent pieces of information. I'm sure between Tony, Mark and I, we can make that happen. So that probably is around the reformatting of the way that we reported now, given the new leadership of Crossrail, but we can work that out.
And there's no change in frequency of report?
No, the reports still come on a regular basis, and we'll continue to produce them on that basis.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can I thank the Mayor and can I thank our guests?
Chair, can I say one thing, Chair, before we finish the meeting, with your permission?
for attending here. And there was a promise of a response in writing to a question from Assembly Member Bacon, and we'd be happy to receive that through the offices of office sitting by my left. Yes.
Chair, can I just say just a few things? Firstly, I'll make sure that Assembly Member Bacon's written to. Secondly, Assembly Member Pigeon raised the issue of minutes. I'll follow that up with the Chair of Crossrail. Chair, you'll be aware, in addition to the Chief Executive writing to you, as well as the Chair of the Transport Committee every month, in addition to this being discussed at the TfL board meeting in public and the publication of those minutes, can I, through you, Chair, offer the Assembly to come back with the team in 6 months' time to give an update, in addition to all the other pieces of information we're providing the Assembly, because I think actually you kicking the ties is quite a good way of making sure we provide the public with information, but also the good thing about this team is they don't mind having this further checks and balances, they don't mind this sort of challenge. So with your permission, Chair, of course, if there's anything untoward, we'll come back before then as a team, but through you, Chair, I'm happy to offer in 6 months' time to come back before the plenary.
Thank you for that offer. I'll take it to the Bureau of Leaders, and I'm sure it's always good to be concentrated, so an hour for an update sounds pretty reasonable. So I'll take that to Bureau of Leaders and get back to you, but thanks for that offer. Members, thank you. And we now move to part B of this second part of our meeting. So can I ask the Assembly to note the answers to the questions asked? Great. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you all for your time. Meeting is over. Thank you very much, Chair.
GLA